What happens when the DM is not a fan of pets? Let me describe the situation. I'd always been lucky and not had any truly horrific experiences with role-playing games, but then over the past month or so, this campaign happened. The cast are me playing a halfling ranger, unearthed arcana ranger since I heard the base ranger is dreadful, the DM, a paladin, a druid, and 2 bards. I joined the group midway through the campaign when everyone was already at level 3, which let me start with my pet, a giant spider. There were a total of 5 sessions before I ended up quitting, so I'll try to summarize the events of each session. In session 1, the party met my ranger and she joined them on their adventure. Not long after, we followed some tracks from the scene of a slaughter and came across an owlbear. During this fight, the DM decided the owlbear would attack the last thing to attack it, which was my ranger's pet spider, and he used both of the owlbear's attacks on it, and crit, instantly taking out my character's pet on my first battle of the campaign. After this, we discovered that the back of the cave led to some kind of spooky ruins, which we decided to ignore since we had a time-critical mission the others were on from the previous sessions before I joined. After we left, we traveled and ended up on a rope bridge that collapsed under the paladin, dropping him into a forested valley with some tree enemies. The tree enemies chased him into a cave, which turned out to be the back of the ruins we had tried to avoid, meaning we ended up having to deal with that stuff anyway. In session 2, we made it to the dungeon which had our objective for the ongoing time-sensitive quest and came across the Nothic. It ends up using its rotting gaze on my ranger, and I rolled a 16 for the con save. That was a failure, since the DM wanted to mix up enemies to prevent metagaming. Wouldn't normally care since that's okay, but that's a pretty big increase to save difficulty, but not a huge deal. The problem came from after, when the DM informed me that all necrotic damage would cause my max HP to drop, so I need a long rest to recover my max HP. There seems to be a common mistake due to the fact that all max HP drain effects cause necrotic damage, which makes people think that max HP drain is an inherent trait of necrotic damage. When I pointed this out to the DM, he brushed me off. Later on, in the dungeon, we had to make an acrobatics check to move through a thin gap in some rubble. My pet spider makes a good roll for her check, but apparently just barely fits through, disturbing the rubble as she does so, making the gap a little smaller. After that, another player gets the same result as my spider and makes it through completely fine, despite both being medium-sized creatures. Later in the session, we reached an area which we are told will let us have the effects of a long rest in the time of a short rest. I and several others jump at the chance, me being especially happy because it means that I can get rid of the max HP reduction caused by the misinterpretation of necrotic damage. Once the rest is over, we are informed that the area was dense in chaos magic, and that we needed to roll a 1d4 on a table to see what effect happened, with each of us having our own table. My result meant that my highest and lowest stats were swapped, my dex and con. Being a ranger who could only use a short bow, because halfling, this absolutely crippled my character's damage. We were told we could rest again to get a different effect, which I did thinking it would override the first effect. Turned out, the DM just explained it badly, and I ended up with a third eye on top of the previous effect. I didn't mind this effect though, since it gave me advantage on perception. The worst effect any of the others got was the Tabaxi Bard, who got turned into a human and lost his racial abilities. When we made it back to a town and sought help for our problems, my character was able to get her stats swapped back, although her dex was still 2 less than what it used to be for half a quest until she fully recovered. but the problem was that it cost her the third eye in order to change back, losing the one positive thing she gained from the experience. In session 3, we made it to a new town, and I talked to the blacksmith about getting some barding for my character's giant spider, since she uses it as a mount most of the time. The blacksmith says he will try, but says I have to leave my spider with him for a few days. I shrug and agree, planning on doing some hunting and gathering for a few days of downtime while that happens, since not having my pet is a huge chunk of my damage potential gone. While doing my downtime stuff, I roll a natural 20 for my survival check to gather ingredients for potions and poisons, and I only end up getting enough components to make one very weak healing potion. In session 4, the DM, through an NPC, tells the druid about a giant snake in the area, seemingly put there by the DM just to give the druid a new shape-shifting form. My character, while doing her hunting thing, makes use of her Unarthakana ranger ability called Primeval Sense, which lets her spend 1 minute concentrating in order to know the numbers, locations, and conditions of every preferred enemy within a 5-mile radius. Since her preferred enemy is beasts, I had been using it fairly regularly to locate stuff like animals to hunt, like deer. Upon sensing the giant snake, I had my ranger's eyes light up and get excited because, cute noodle baby, I must find it, and made a beeline for it. On the way, her and the Tabaxi Bard, who is helping her hunt, run into a kobold. DM calls for us to make a perception check, and we notice the kobold is slipping a suspicious vial of something into his back pocket. We decide not to press because 1, we have a giant snake to get to, and 2, my character's not really in a position to get into a big quest with fights due to missing her pet/mount. When we continue, we end up running into a wall too big to really climb over, and with no way around. The DM informing us that the giant snake is in an area only authorized personnel can get to, despite the fact that not only the druid being there with the giant snake at that moment, but also being with a small child who led them there. My ranger ends up giving up on the giant snake and going after some fire beetles she sensed, only to find out that they're too angry at being attacked by the town guard to be reasoned with. Session ends with my ranger going to pick up her spider and barding, only to be informed by the blacksmith he wasn't able to do it as he hands back my money. The DM also went on a passive-aggressive rant about how if we, the players, didn't bite the plot hooks, then we would end up basically doing nothing for the entire session. A plot hook he all but literally slapped me and the bard in the face with while I was severely lacking in combat ability, and while we already had something we were doing. Session 5. New Town, New Adventures. My ranger does her beast sense thing to look for animals to hunt/tame again. She finds very little and ends up deciding, oh, a crow pet would be pretty cute, and heads for one. DM complains to everyone about both my character AoE Beast Sense as well as the Paladin's AoE Divine Sense ability. I find the crow, and with a mix of primeval awareness, causing beasts to see my ranger as kindred spirits, and a well-rolled animal handling check, it looks like I'm about to tame it when it literally explodes. Because apparently young teens in this backwater town that smells of poop are able to obtain basically small fireworks. At about the same time, the druid is able to steal a pigeon from a homing pigeon facility in town, and was, upon leaving, immediately told to roll a dex save. After rolling, the DM was informed that the pigeon had slipped free and flown off. The DM then proceeded to say that he didn't want a bunch of pets because he would have to control them all. Which, not really. And then he said that he would only allow us to have pets if we would forfeit the ability to level up anymore, since the pets would be the ones doing all the work, not us. This was the last straw that caused me to finally decide to leave this campaign, and I made an excuse to leave the session early. I later found out from the Tabaxi Bard that after I left, the paladin had gone on a small quest in the town which was listed on the quest board as pest control. At the end of the quest, he was rewarded with a familiar. Not a pet. Definitely not the same thing. Don't question the mighty DM. That was described to me as a smallish dragon. I'm glad I wasn't still in the session at that point because I would have absolutely lost it. So there you go, my worst experience with any role-playing game to date, and I'm hoping my worst ever because I would hate to think of a campaign I could come out of hating worse than this. These are the worst kind of horror stories because it's basically a lot of little red flags that builds up to the major one. I don't know why a DM would ever say you can't level up. That is just asking for players to leave. Then to turn around and offer a familiar after practically banning pets is a very strange move. I don't know what's going on here, but the no leveling was a big enough of a red flag for me. What do you all think about this situation?